Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell to join the shadows. Stay brave, if you dare. It started with a box. Daniel had been clearing out his grandmother's house after she passed when he found it in the attic. Dust and cobwebs covered everything, but one object stood out: a small, unlabeled cassette tape inside a wooden box. The only marking on it was a faded, hand-scrawled message across the case: "Do not play." Something about it unsettled him. Maybe it was the way the box was hidden beneath loose floorboards, almost as if someone had wanted it buried. Maybe it was the eerie silence of the attic, the way the dust hung in the air, thick and heavy. He should have left it alone, but curiosity is a dangerous thing. That night, alone in his apartment, he found an old cassette player. The machine whirred as he slid the tape in and pressed play. At first, just static, a faint whispering hiss. Then, a voice. Low, rasping, speaking in a language Daniel didn't recognize. The words slithered over each other, overlapping, distorted, like something not meant for human ears. Then came the breathing. Wet, ragged, too close to the microphone. It grew louder, labored, like someone, or something, was right there, gasping in his ear. And then, his name. Daniel. His breath caught in his throat. His hands shook as he hit stop. The tape fell silent. The air in his apartment suddenly felt thick, suffocating. He could feel something lingering in the silence. He told himself it was just an old, creepy recording, just a coincidence. Until the phone rang. Daniel stared at the screen. No caller ID. A chill crawled down his spine. It was past midnight. Who would be calling at this hour? He let it go to voicemail. A moment later, the notification appeared. One new message. With shaking hands, he pressed play. Static. The same whispers. And then, the breathing. Louder now. Wet, unnatural, closer. Then, his name again. Daniel. His stomach twisted. But this time, the voice wasn't coming from his phone. It was coming from his closet. Sleep didn't come easily that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he swore he could hear it. The static, the whispering, the breathing. Just beneath the hum of his apartment. At 3:12 a.m., something moved outside his bedroom door. A slow, creaking sound, like the hinges of his closet groaning open. Footsteps, software bare, moving toward his bed. Daniel didn't move. He didn't breathe. He just listened. And then, right next to his ear, breathing. A voice, low and too close. "Let me in." The bedroom light flickered on. The room was empty, but the closet door was open. And inside, something shifted. Daniel stopped sleeping after that. The next day, he tried to destroy the tape. He smashed it with a hammer. It was perfectly intact. He tried burning it, but the flame wouldn't catch. The whispers followed him everywhere, through the radio static, through the hum of his refrigerator, even through the silence of his apartment. Then, the phone calls started again. Always at 3:12 a.m. Always the same voicemail. Static, breathing, whispers, and now, laughter. Low, guttural, getting closer. Desperate for answers, Daniel returned to his grandmother's house. In the attic, buried beneath old newspapers, he found an old journal. The yellowed pages crumbled at the edges, but one passage stood out. It was dated 1957, written in his great-grandfather's trembling hand. The voices come from the tape. It does not play sound. It plays them. If you hear it, they hear you. And once you listen, they never stop. Daniel's blood turned to ice. He slammed the book shut, his pulse hammering in his ears. Then, his phone rang. No caller ID. His breath hitched. Slowly, he answered. Silence. Then, breathing. Not through the phone. From behind him. "Let me in." The line went dead. The next morning, Daniel's apartment was empty. His phone lay on the floor, screen shattered. The last voicemail played on loop. Static, breathing, laughter, and then one final whisper. "Now you've heard it too." Ben had always loved solo camping. There was something about the silence, the isolation, the feeling of being completely alone under the endless stretch of stars. No traffic, no voices, just the crackling of a fire and the whisper of the wind through the trees. This time, he had chosen a remote stretch of forest, miles away from the nearest town. No cell service, no trails, just nature. He had hiked all day, set up camp by a quiet lake, and now sat by the fire, sipping coffee, staring into the dark. That's when he heard it, a snap of a branch. Ben tensed, holding his breath. Probably just an animal, a deer maybe. He listened, waiting for another sound. Silence. He exhaled, shaking his head. Relax, man. It was easy to let your imagination get the best of you out here. Still, something felt off. The forest was too quiet. The usual nighttime sounds, crickets, distant owls, rustling leaves, had all vanished. It was as if the woods were holding their breath. And then, crack. Ben's stomach tightened. He grabbed his flashlight and aimed it toward the trees. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating gnarled trunks and shifting shadows. Nothing. Probably an animal, he told himself again. But his skin prickled with unease. Then, something moved. A dark shape just beyond the firelight. Too tall to be an animal. His breath hitched. "Hello?" he called, forcing his voice to stay steady. "Anyone there?" No answer. Ben stood up slowly, gripping his flashlight tighter. He swung the beam back and forth. Nothing. Just trees and shadows. He exhaled, letting out a shaky laugh. "I'm being paranoid." Still, he tossed a few more logs into the fire, making it burn brighter. He wasn't ready to crawl into his tent just yet. And then, just as he sat back down, a low whisper. Ben froze. The sound came from the darkness, just beyond the reach of the firelight. A single word, barely audible. "Come closer." His body went cold. He jumped up, shining his flashlight wildly. Nothing. The trees stood still. The fire crackled. The night was empty. Had he imagined it? His pulse pounded in his ears. He swallowed hard, scanning the woods. Then he saw them. Eyes. A pair of glowing eyes in the distance. They didn't blink. They just watched him. Ben's breath came in quick gasps. His instinct screamed at him to run. But where? Into the pitch-black woods? He wasn't even sure which direction the trail was anymore. The fire was his only defense. He grabbed his knife from his backpack and stepped closer to the flames, gripping the handle so tight his knuckles ached. The eyes disappeared. Silence. For a long moment, Ben didn't move. Then, slowly, his heart still hammering, he backed toward his tent. He needed to get inside, zip it up, and wait until dawn. He turned his flashlight toward the tent and screamed. The flap was open. He knew he had zipped it shut. But now, it gaped wide, as if someone, or something, had crawled inside. Ben's breath came in short, panicked gasps. He stepped forward cautiously, hand shaking as he reached for the zipper. He yanked it down. Nothing inside. His sleeping bag was still neatly rolled up, his backpack untouched. The tent felt colder than the outside, like something had been there, watching, waiting. A soft breath brushed against his ear. Ben spun around. Nothing. The fire crackled behind him, the only sound in the oppressive silence. He had to get out of here. Forget the tent, forget the gear. He needed to go. Ben grabbed his flashlight, knife, and keys. He turned toward the path and stopped. A figure stood at the tree line, tall, wrong. Its limbs were too long, its head tilted at an unnatural angle, and even though Ben's flashlight should have illuminated its face, there was nothing, just blackness where a face should be. Ben's blood turned to ice. Then it moved, not walked, not ran, moved, a blur of unnatural jerking motions, straight toward him. Ben bolted. Branches whipped his face as he tore through the forest, running blind, gasping for air. Behind him, footsteps, fast, too fast. The thing was chasing him. He couldn't think, couldn't breathe. His legs burned, his chest ached, but he ran harder. Then, up ahead, his car. He could make it. He had to. The footsteps were right behind him now. He fumbled for his keys, heart slamming against his ribs. He could feel it reaching for him, cold fingers brushing his neck. Ben lunged for the driver's door, slammed it shut, locked it. Silence. His hands trembled as he started the engine. Headlights flooded the woods. Nothing there. Ben sat there, gasping, shaking, gripping the steering wheel so hard his fingers ached. Had he imagined it? Had he just panicked? Then, a hand slapped against the window. Ben screamed. A blackened face, featureless, twisted against the glass. And then, the lights went out. Ben's car was found 3 days later, doors wide open, keys still in the ignition. His gear was untouched at the campsite. When I was 22, I started seeing a guy I met on a dating app. His name was Hunter. We went on 4 dates in a little over a month. At first, things seemed all right. Our first date was just a quick coffee meetup. Less than an hour, more of a screening process to make sure he seemed normal. Our second date was at a nearby bar for drinks. We both got a nice buzz, and it was a good time. Our third date was dinner, and that's when I started questioning things. Questioning if I really clicked with his personality, or if something about him just felt off. The date ended with a kiss, our first and only kiss. Because I had let him kiss me, I convinced myself the date must have gone well. A couple of weeks later, we went on our fourth and final date. Drinks again. This time, I wasn't as excited. I was paying more attention to the little quirks in his behavior, things I had ignored before. His mannerisms gave off an almost antisocial, borderline creepy vibe. He started drinking way too much. He got really touchy-feely at the bar, trying to kiss me multiple times. I'm not a fan of PDA, especially not with people sitting right next to us. I politely turned down his advances, and within minutes, I mentioned that I was tired, heavily implying that we should leave. He asked for the check, paid, and we grabbed our coats. As we walked to our cars, he suddenly stopped me, and very bluntly, asked if we could go home together. I told him, "Not tonight. I'm tired and have work tomorrow." It was a lie. He didn't take no for an answer. He kept trying, insisting that he'd just drive me to work in the morning. It was absurd, whether he was drunk or not. I also wasn't a fan of him driving home drunk. At that moment, I decided I wouldn't see him again. I walked to my car in the parking lot across the street and started driving home, slowly. I had a couple of drinks in my system, not enough to be drunk, but I was still cautious. I was also hyper-aware of my surroundings, looking out for cops. Maybe that's why I noticed it. The same car was behind me. After at least 3 turns, it was still there. At a stoplight, I realized it looked like Hunter's car. I texted him, "Are you following me?" His response came quickly. "Yes, I just want to make sure you get home okay." I called him. He wouldn't pick up. This was so weird, and quite frankly, creepy. I pulled over and texted him again. "Stop following me. I'm fine." He stopped in the middle of the street, paused, probably reading my message, then drove off past me. He didn't text back. Not until I was home, in bed. "I hope I didn't weird you out tonight. Sorry I got so drunk. Next time, we should do something a little more low-key, like dinner at my place or something." I didn't answer. The next morning, he followed up. "Oh no, is the vibe dead?" I still waited to respond. Less than 2 hours later, he sent a single question mark. I decided to reply before it got worse. "Hey, I had a great time getting to know you, but I just think our personalities don't click that much. I also really just want to focus on myself right now. I hope you understand." That's when the angry texts started. The worst one. "No, I don't understand. You strung me along for 4 dates just to tell me that? How about you pay me back for half of everything I bought for you?" There were a few other messages, even more aggressive, with personal details he shouldn't have known. I blocked him. I thought that was the end of it. Then, the no-caller ID phone calls started. Non-stop. I ignored them until, finally, he seemed to get the message and stopped. The next day, when my parents weren't home, I came back from work to find a bouquet of flowers on the front step, along with a card. The card was an apology from Hunter. He was asking for a second chance. He knew where I lived. My stomach dropped. Did he follow me home that night? Did he look up my information somehow? I sent him one final message. "Do not contact me again. Do not come to my house again. If you do, I will file for a restraining order." I kept his number blocked. I didn't want to see whatever response he had. I thought things would be over now. I was wrong. That night, I was home alone. My parents were gone. Our house was big, and I had a loft bedroom, the highest point in the house. I woke up in the middle of the night. At first, I wasn't sure why. Then I heard it. A noise from downstairs. I lay there listening. Then, unmistakably, I heard a door open. Not the front door. A door inside the house. From outside my bedroom. Nobody was supposed to be home. My blood ran cold. Intruder. I crawled out of bed and slid under it, my hands fumbling for my phone. I texted my family. "Who's home?" No response. Then, distant noises from somewhere in the house, one of the other bedrooms. My bedroom door creaked open. Footsteps coming up the carpeted stairs to my loft. Then, silence. I held my breath, every muscle. I was home alone for the weekend. My parents were out of town, and I was looking forward to a quiet couple of days. The first night was normal. I watched some TV, made popcorn, and scrolled through my phone before finally going to bed around midnight. I woke up to a sound. At first, I wasn't sure if I had imagined it, but then I heard it again, a creak from downstairs. My heart started to race, but I told myself it was just the house settling. That's what old houses do, right? They make noises. Then, another sound. This time, it was unmistakable. A click. It was the sound of a door unlocking. I sat up in bed, holding my breath. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to move, to do something, but I couldn't. I was frozen, listening. Soft footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming inside. My stomach dropped. Someone was in the house. I reached for my phone, my hands trembling as I typed a text to my parents. I think someone just came inside. No response. The footsteps moved further into the house. A floorboard groaned under the weight of whoever was there. Then, silence. I strained my ears, listening, but I couldn't tell where they were. Were they still downstairs? Were they moving toward the stairs? I slid out of bed as quietly as possible, my bare feet barely making a sound against the floor. Slowly, I crept toward my bedroom door, pressing my ear against it. Nothing. I turned the lock on my door as silently as I could, backing away toward my closet. My heart pounded so hard I was sure it would give me away. Then, a thump against the stairs. Another. They were coming up. I covered my mouth with my hand, forcing myself not to make a sound. The footsteps were heavier now, more confident, less careful. Halfway up, I scrambled inside my closet, pressing myself into the corner behind a row of hanging clothes. I dialed 911 and barely breathed as the operator answered. Before I could say a word, a whisper just outside my bedroom door. "I know you're awake." I nearly dropped the phone. I pressed my body as far back into the closet as I could, trying to disappear. My bedroom door clicked. They had turned the knob. Slowly, it creaked open. Silence. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, feel the sweat on my skin. Then, footsteps on my carpet. Closer. The closet door creaked. A shadow moved behind the slats. And then, a hand reached through the clothes. I screamed, shoving past the dark figure and bolting out of the room. My feet barely touched the stairs as I stumbled down them, nearly falling as I reached the front door. My fingers fumbled with the lock, shaking so hard it took 3 tries before I got it open. I ran outside, screaming for help. By the time the police arrived, the house was empty. No sign of forced entry, no sign of anyone, just my open closet door.